Good evening and welcome to
Laughter Club.
Let me introduce to you my co-host this evening, my wonderful daughter, Dunya Alhegelan.
And I'd like to introduce to you Omar Alhegelan, who you probably know already.
Tonight's topic is
About growth.
and we're going to break it down into three segments, which is physical growth, educational growth, and emotional growth. So Dunya, can you tell me a little bit or give me an example of physical growth?
Plants and trees.
Plants and trees, exactly. What do you think that they need to grow? They need soil,
Water.
sunlight,
Vitamin D.
and
Air.
air. Absolutely wonderful. Do you know that we need exactly the same things? We need, for instance, food, which is our soil, and then water, sunlight,
Again, vitamin C.
very important for us, and air to grow. You see, Dunya, growing is essential to nature, and therefore it is natural for us as well. We grow or we die. It's really that simple. Look at nature around you. When was the last time you saw vegetation stagnant or in limbo? It doesn't, it goes through cycles. It can't just be in one place. From birth to death, it adapts with the seasons. And so must we. So I would like for all of us to make it a point to feed our souls, to water our passions, to soak in the rays of our trials and errors, and to breathe the air of our accomplishments and our growth. Educational growth. What do you think is an example of educational growth?
A school.
School, absolutely. That's where we learn to read.
And to write.
Exactly, that's called literacy. And another thing, it's the social education. For instance, all our experiences, making friends, dealing with the ups and downs of friendships. What's another example? Falling and standing back up. These are all examples of our educational growth. Also, for instance, when you do sports, let me ask you a question, Dunya. When you first started doing diving or gymnastics, were you good from day one, from the very beginning?
No.
It took time, right? You had to practice and you had to go through a lot of different steps. I'd like to tell you guys a little story here about Dunya when she first started diving. She actually got to the point where she was diving off the 3-meter platform. And one day we were playing together and we were diving together, and she did a dive from the 3-meter platform.
But
and
I had no idea what I wanted to do, a straight jump or a dive, so I did a forward dive straight. And I, on 3 meter, and I never did before.
And she actually hurt herself. And she was in the water and she was crying and she was telling me, I want to go home, I want to go home. And I said, okay, absolutely, you have all the right in the world to go home. But I said, do you think you could do one more dive, proverbially get back on the horse again? And you know what? She did another dive and she did a great dive.
But how can we do a dive with a horse?
Yeah, well, that's just an expression. You're right. And I've never been so proud of her as that moment when she did that dive. You see, Dunya, everything in life is hard to do when you don't know how. And once you know how to do it, it becomes easy. And educational growth is about learning and advancing. Education in all its forms is a journey towards pleasure and happiness. It is a path that will help us grow and become the best that we can be. Emotionally speaking now, if we talk about emotional growth, can you tell me what emotions are?
Feelings.
Exactly. And can you give me examples? What are the two general categories of feelings and emotions?
Positive and negative.
Right. So let's figure out some examples of positive emotions. They're
Happy.
joy.
Love.
And some negative feelings would be what?
Sad.
Being sad, being jealous, fear,
Anger.
Absolutely. And so in order to talk about emotional literacy and getting in touch with our emotions, let's first understand what that means, that term emotional literacy means. So let's break it down. Emotional is emotions, which is E for energy, in motion. And literacy meaning learning how to read and write. So how to read and write this energy that we have in motion within us. So we like to use a term instead of positive and negative. For positive, we like to use a word called expansive. Do you know what expansive is?
It's like a balloon that wants to burst, but it can't.
That's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because when we have a positive, what you call positive, we call expansive, Joyce. What do we feel like doing?
Going on the roof and saying, "Hey world, I did this, blah blah blah. Hey world, I did this, blah blah blah."
Absolutely. That's what we want to do. We want to yell and scream it out because we're so happy, we're in love, we're positive, and so on. And when we have these constricting, do you know what constrictive means?
It means like the balloon, it's losing its air.
That's right. It's getting smaller and smaller. So when we have constrictive feelings of jealousy, sadness, and anger, we don't want to talk to anyone. We just want to be small and inside, right? We're focusing on our problems and all that energy. So, you know what? In order to deal with these emotions, we have to know the following. Number one, we have to learn to recognize. So know exactly what it is that we're feeling. Second, we have to acknowledge, we have to really own these emotions and feel them deep down inside. We have to take responsibility for the good and accept the bad and not blame it on the outside world. And third of all, we have to understand what is happening to me. And in so doing, I can learn from this. Once we've done those three things, you know what we can do, Dunya? We can then express our feelings. And we can learn the appropriate way to express the root emotions of love, anger, fear, and jealousy. In conclusion, I would like to say to remember that growth is a choice. You can always move forward towards prosperity, or you can choose to remain stuck in your comfort and safety of the past. It's really up to you, but I know you will choose wisely. Raising, educating, learning from my child, from Dunya, has been my biggest and most rewarding growth experience in life. And remember that it's by falling and failing that we ultimately learn how to get back up and grow to our best potential. Mark Twain said, let me say this to you. Mark Twain, a famous American writer, said, "Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment." Let me say that one more time. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment.
Think about that.
Think about that. And you know what? I leave you with this one question. How do we teach our children to grow without them falling into the abyss that is the loss of innocence? I'd love to hear your answers on this question, so please write to us at info@Life
Talks Live,
or our social media, Facebook,
Life Talk Live,
or Twitter,
Life Talks Live,
Instagram.
Life Talks Live.
So please tune in tomorrow night for Faisal as he will give us his insights on
leadership.
We close as we always do with love, peace, and respect. Salam, shalom, namaste. Thank you. Good night.